Welcome back. It's Susan Linder. I'm your host of the Innovation Storyteller Show, and we are diving into our special series called Nordic Visionaries, where I talk with some of the best and brightest minds from the Nordics about this incredible intersection of innovation and sustainability. My listeners, you are in for a treat because we are looking at ways of how the Nordics are handling this brilliant melding of innovation and sustainability with some of the greatest thinkers of our contemporaries today to see what we can learn and what is happening in our moment right now that we can apply to our innovations as well as our businesses and probably our lives too. That's why I'm so thrilled to have with me today a very special guest here in my hometown in New York. Anu Bradford is the Henry L. Moses Professor of Law and International Organizations at Columbia Law School. She is also a director for Columbia's European Legal Studies Center and a senior scholar at Jerome A. Chazen Institute for Global Business at Columbia Business School. She is an expert on European Union law, digital regulation, international trade law, and comparative and international antitrust law. Bradford is the author of The Brussels Effect: How the European Union Rules Won the World, from 2020, which was named one of the best books of 2020 by Foreign Affairs. Her most recent book, Digital Empires: The Global Battle to Regulate Technology, was published by Oxford University Press in September 2023. We're going to be talking about that today. And it was recognized as one of the best books of 2023 by the Financial Times and awarded the 2024 Steinrocken Prize for Comparative Social Science Research. Wow. Anu, what an honor. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Susan. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
So we are living in hot times when it comes to all things tech, innovation, sustainability. These are not easy waters to navigate for folks working in innovation.
That is absolutely right. And right when we thought that the world was already complex, now I think we really know what complexity and uncertainty means. So companies need to navigate through rather unprecedented challenges. Challenges in terms of changes in technology, but also some fundamental shifts in geopolitics, international relations, the way the supply chains work globally. If you just look at the transformation or sort of rewriting the entire global economic order, that is a lot for anybody trying to run a company, let alone multinational company, today's world.
Yeah. So who do you think has the hardest time of it right now? Is it the legal team that's really pulling their hair out? Is it the innovation team, the sustainability team, or the CEO who has to manage all of these things? Where do you think the biggest pressure point is in the boardroom right now?
Yeah, so I must say that it's all of the above. So I obviously work a lot with lawyers. I train lawyers, and the legal questions that they are facing are no longer just legal questions. They need to really think about how law is responding to the changing geopolitics. But these are issues now that are elevated to the board level. They are elevated to the CEO level. So we don't really talk about technical issues anymore, but we're talking about sort of fundamental strategic choices facing companies as they are navigating and innovating through these challenges. So I would say that everybody needs to rethink within the company their strategies. They need to think about the opportunities from a very different perspective. And that really requires kind of all hands on deck approach. So I think all of them are really fully needed to put their best minds to work and work together to solve these challenges.
So let's take a look at what it is to be an American company today. You and I are both sitting here in New York. You're up at Columbia. I'm a little bit further south. And there are big shifts happening in the world of tech that are impacting all of us, regardless if we're in manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, or what have you. What's happening in tech has become the bellwether for the rest of us. So let's talk about what's happening right now in the world of tech. There was a big, let's say, regulatory process that's happening with the EU, with Meta and Apple at the moment. Big fines are coming down the pike. Can you explain to us a little bit about what's happening there and what the implications are potentially for other companies that are really fast-moving, innovative companies in the world today?
So absolutely. So I would say that there is a just fundamental digital transformation that the companies are going through. Artificial intelligence is obviously at the very heart of that transformation. That brings us tremendous opportunities for every company and for every government, and we need to seize those opportunities. But there are also new risks that need to be mitigated. And the governments are now increasingly conscious that they need to govern artificial intelligence. They need to govern technology through various regulatory actions that we are seeing. And the European Union has been really at the forefront on all these governance issues. So this is what you were referring to, that we now see some would say multi-front effort to regulate the biggest tech companies, including leading US tech companies that are facing antitrust investigations, privacy probes, investigations on the content moderation or the absence of such content moderation on the platforms. Artificial Intelligence Act, a new regulatory instrument that was enacted by the Europeans, is now something that is forcing the companies not just to think how they adopt AI, but how they ensure compliance with the various regulatory obligations so that they can at the same time maximize innovation, but just make sure that the pathways towards that innovations are consistent with the regulatory requirements. And yeah, you mentioned this week was a really big week. We saw the European Union for the first time issue fines against Meta and Apple under this Digital Markets Act. That is a regulation targeting these biggest gatekeepers that have a very special hold on the digital ecosystem. And that is now potentially sort of quite fundamentally changing the business models of these companies. So we're really living through a rather big moment in how technology is shaping us, but also then how technology is being shaped by these various regulatory actions.
And do you think that same level of regulatory control will come to the United States as well?
Well, it looked like the United States was moving that way under President Biden. There seemed to be increasingly a bipartisan consensus that the big tech companies have become too powerful and needed to be regulated. There were many bills seeking to pursue more ambitious privacy regulation at the federal level. We saw antitrust bills being proposed in Congress. We saw executive action. So we saw the agencies pursue really ambitious antitrust investigations against these big tech companies, including requesting the breakup of a company like Google. So it really seemed like we were moving quite far in terms of transatlantic alignment. But now we obviously have a new era. We have President Trump back in the White House, and we see an increasing alignment between the tech companies and this administration. So we see the tech companies being some of the leading contributors to the inauguration, reserving a front row seat at the inauguration. And we see now potentially a much lighter regulation in the United States. So all those movements that we saw towards greater regulation, we see now the US backtrack from those. So President Biden issued a rather sweeping executive order on artificial intelligence that was promptly revoked by President Trump. Interestingly, though, we are still seeing this administration pursue antitrust cases against the tech companies. So we still see a concern of the market power that these companies have, which potentially is then a shared concern on both sides of Atlantic. But I would say that if you look at the role that an individual, a tech CEO like Elon Musk has assumed in the government, we are going to see much lighter regulation, most likely in domains like content moderation. So much more kind of a techno-libertarian, free for all. We tolerate hate speech in the name of just maximizing free speech.
Yeah. Or maximizing dollars.
Exactly. Yeah. That too.
Right. Because it's more monetized content than it is free speech. It's whatever gets the most clicks. It's not whoever has the best ideas.
Yeah, and there just seems to be often the correlation is that the kinds of online content that generates most traction is often more controversial. And that's where the dollars are, because that's where the advertising revenue is. And a lot of these companies, the biggest online platforms, the model is surveillance capitalism. The model is to use our data to then target advertising on us, which also requires that we spend a lot of time online. And our engagement in social media and other platforms is the way then to obtain that data.
Yeah. So yeah, it's from rage to riches.
Exactly.
Is really the catchphrase these days. But, as we thought about it over the last couple of years, we've been seeing that this marriage between innovation and sustainability, more so coming from the Nordics, certainly, we've been inspired by seeing how sustainability is actually a driver of innovation in many cases, right? And we know as innovators that constraint leads to great innovation sometimes, right? A regulation can actually lead us to greater innovation. But now we're removing here in the United States some of that sustainability ethos. And I'm feeling like I know a lot of my listeners have been spending a lot of time over the last decade trying to come in line with whether it's the Paris Climate Accords or others, right?
Yeah.
We're really trying to get our ESG goals, right, from the UN. We're really trying to get our arms around sustainability. And now it seems like it's almost out of fashion, like low-rise jeans or something is not part of the equation anymore when we're talking about sustainability. What are you seeing on the other side of the Atlantic? What are you seeing in the Nordics? Is there still a dedication to sustainability? It feels like it's part of the culture of the Nordics, frankly.
I think you are absolutely right, Susan. So when you talk to consumers, when you talk to companies, I think there is a genuine commitment to sustainability. It is the ethos, the value base for many of these companies, and they are responding to genuine market demand. That's the kind of products that consumers ultimately want. So in that sense, I have faith that it is somewhat stickier. It is not just that because there was a regulatory mandate, we reluctantly committed to these sustainability goals. And as soon as we see a political moment to walk away from those goals, the companies would seize that. I don't think that is right, because in many ways, that is also seen as part of the competitive advantage of these companies. Privacy enhancing products are seen often in the eyes of consumers as better quality products. So the company can really distinguish themselves in the marketplace by offering privacy enhanced applications. So in that sense, I think we are not going to see a wholesale move away from these values, but we do need to recognize that we are now pursuing innovation and running the businesses in a very different political and geopolitical environment. And there certainly is a backlash on regulation. There are efforts to dismantle some of those regulations. So we certainly see in the United States now a move away from some of those commitments, whether we talk about DEI or ESG. And some of that conversation is reverberating in Europe as well, in part because the Trump administration is also indicating that it does not want the American companies operating on European markets to be treated unfairly. And some of these regulatory obligations are portrayed as being excessive, being protectionist, being unfair. So we see certain pressures to repeal or at least ease the enforcement of some of these regulations. But I think we're also seeing some internal challenges into the sustainability and rights protective regulation in Europe. The Europeans have become extremely focused, for an understandable reason, on the regulatory, I would say the technological independence, strategic sovereignty, if you like, and competitiveness, because there is a sense that they cannot be dependent. The Europeans cannot be dependent on US technologies any more than Chinese technologies. They really need to develop their own technologies. And there needs to be economic growth, which means for many that there needs to be fewer regulatory constraints. So there is this deregulatory agenda that is now very much part of the conversation in Brussels, and we see how far-reaching it will be. And so we really are going to see the companies distinguish themselves among those who are genuinely, fundamentally committed to these values and will hold on to them regardless. And I think we will see that many of them do, because they make the case that it also makes them more competitive. It is not a choice between competitiveness and commitment to sustainability. It's not, I think there's a false choice between protecting the digital rights and privacy and being a competitive company.
It seems like also we've entered into this space where what we've accepted as foundations of our economy, our innovation, our sustainability, our understanding of those definitions is shifting very quickly. Mm-hmm. So everything kind of feels like we're in a negotiation economy, where each company has to think about, as a CEO or as the board, sitting in front of a sound mixing board, like for a musical artist. And we're constantly tweaking these little levers to figure out, okay, where do I fit into regulatory compliance? Where do I really need to push my competitive advantage and maybe sacrifice one of those values that feel so intrinsic to me, but now don't make it possible to compete against China or the United States in a time where we thought we knew what the status quo was.
Absolutely. And nobody knows anymore what the status quo is. Nobody has a script, because nobody knows what's happening tomorrow. And there, the United States and this administration is really contributing to unprecedented volatility. The uncertainty, I think, in many ways is the biggest challenge, that the skillful, robust companies, they can adjust. They can sort of rewire some of their innovative processes if they have visibility of what is lying ahead of them. But right now, I think that visibility is not there, that the signals that the United States is sending in terms of the trade war, are they tariffs, are they not tariffs? It makes it very difficult to plan ahead. How would you think about your supply chains? Would I then build some factories in the United States? Where am I investing when the volatility is just so high?
Yeah. So what are some examples you might be able to offer us, Anu, on innovation in tech and where things are changing? Are there companies that you're seeing either in the Nordics or here in the United States that are setting an example of how we might be thinking about this?
So I think the Nordics are doing something that I'm just so inspired by when I go to my own native Helsinki, or recently I attended a Tech Arena conference in Stockholm. There are lots of fantastic startups. There's actually a lot of innovation taking place in Europe. I think where the Europeans need to do a better job, and this is now a call to decision makers, is that you need to allow those great innovations to succeed, meaning you need to give them the possibility to scale across an integrated digital single market, which now is still too fragmented. That's the big difference. It's not that the startups coming from thriving European capitals are less innovative, but compared to their US counterpart, it is much harder for them to scale across 27 different markets with different regulatory obligations, different languages, and so forth. And the second is that they do pretty well in the first few funding rounds in Europe, but then they hit a ceiling. There is no integrated capital markets union in Europe. So they need to turn to US venture capital, or these wonderful European startups are sooner or later acquired by the American tech giants. And that also needs to change. So I really welcome this conversation that is now taking place in Europe in the aftermath of this report. There was a prominent report on European competitiveness that was drafted by the former president of the European Central Bank, former Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, and he was calling for rather fundamental reforms in Europe. And one of the ones that I fully agree with is that we need to create capital markets union. So the innovations are there. The challenge is how we commercialize those innovations, how we fund them, how we scale them above a certain size. And that's why I think when I visit the various, especially the Nordics, there's tremendous intellectual firepower. There's incredible entrepreneurship. There are just absolutely striking innovations. And now we just need to make sure that they can succeed. And if I can add one thing to the to-do list, is that we need to also have these startups hire the best talent from all around the world. So maybe you start your company in a place like Helsinki, but then you find that there are other engineers that you need as you scale. You shouldn't be limited to the market of Finland or the markets of Nordics or even the market the size of the European Union. You should be able to hire the best Chinese AI scientists. You should be able to get some of the Indian tech talent come to Europe as well. And that's something that the United States has been very, very successful in tapping into the global talent. But right now, as this administration is assuming a very hostile stand towards immigration, I think it's a tremendous opportunity for Europe. I think the Nordics should show the way for the rest of Europe in rolling out the red carpet and welcoming that talent, because there is just a really exciting innovation ecosystem that this foreign talent could tap into and help scale those innovations.
Yeah. And this is especially true when it comes to research facilities, right, that are losing their funding, that are unsure about their granting, the future of their grants and so forth, right? There's an opportunity in the Nordics where federal governments are very interested in funding breakthrough.
Absolutely. There is a really long tradition in valuing research and development, excellent universities. And right now, I think an increasing openness to really do cutting edge research and make sure that that research gets funded and that can emanate from some of those leading research institutions in the Nordics.
What do you think is the importance of the storytelling? My audience is very interested in how do we tell these stories, especially in light, I feel like we're on VUCA Island here, and like we're in the middle of a VUCA volcano, a volatility uncertainty, right? That's happening at the moment. How do we help speak to our customers, our citizens, in explaining some of this, the shift that's happening in the moment? How important a role do you think storytelling is in getting the point across to our audiences?
I think it's extremely important because in many ways, this is a really unsettling moment. And we need to try different ways to speak to different audiences so that everybody has the new kind of analytical framework to understand what's going on and adjust to this moment. So some like to hold on to facts. So you need to be able to provide all that research and all that analysis, even though that is also very difficult given the fundamental shifting underneath us. But I think what you say about storytelling, in many ways, I think that can be both used to make it very clear exactly how deep some of these challenges are, to really kind of make sure that we can seize the moment, not give the kind of false comfort, but really make sure that all of us are now fully tuned to the situation, that the challenges facing us. But also then there are opportunities when you navigate through these challenges. It's an opportunity to really think anew who we are, what we stand for. If some of these institutions around us are being dismantled, we also need to be focused on rebuilding. And I think that is the moment also to do that through those stories. I think all of us look for inspiration. We look for encouragement. We look for reassurance. And I think those who can seize this moment and turn that into an opportunity by really having now the courage to think more bravely, incrementally, and I think to really highlight those stories and bring them to the light, I think can then inspire others to tell their stories and think in, I would say, more creative, more novel ways. And that, I think, is exactly what we need at this moment.
Yeah. And as someone who does storytelling for a living, this is a huge opportunity for my listeners to think about just what you said is, are you driving toward a vision, right? Not just holding on for dear life. To stop for a moment with your boards, with your teams, and really think about where can I move my business and my team forward toward, rather than just saying, we're just managing it day by day, which may very well be the case, but none of our companies succeeded without having an idea of where we're going to. Because by the way, we're not going to follow leaders who don't have a destination in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so thinking about what that destination looks like is very helpful to keep our eyes on the horizon, even if we might need to take a couple of detours along the way.
I think you're so right. I think people at this time, they really want leadership and they want clarity. Right. And when you find a company that seems to just sort of find their center, find their direction, and effectively communicate what that direction is. And no matter what is changing, this is who we are. These are some of the issues we will continue to do. But then if X happens, we will adjust here. If Y happens, this is what we also prepared to do. So you show the depth of your understanding and your preparedness and your resilience, but then some kind of fundamental values that everybody can hold on to, that this is going to be at the heart of any decisions they make as they navigate the storm, as they navigate the uncertainty.
Yeah, very well said. I have a couple of questions for you as well, Anu, that I ask all of my guests here on Nordic Visionaries. So I'm going to put you on the hot seat a little bit and ask you, who are the Nordic innovators who have inspired you? I'm thinking about authors, designers, environmentalists, any books that come to mind that have really shaped your thinking on this intersection of innovation, sustainability, or maybe even just guided how you think about life?
Oh, there's quite a few. So I must say that given how much I work in the tech space and how often I am asked the question, where are the European tech giants, and why isn't there a European Google? I'm really glad that I can have some examples. So I would say Daniel Ek and Spotify. Spotify is wonderful. I listen to that every single day. The whole world knows Spotify and loves Spotify. So it's not only a great tech company, it's a beloved tech company. And I think it shows the way that there can be just world-class European Nordic tech companies that are innovators.
And you're probably listening to this podcast on Spotify right now. If you're
Exactly, Susan. So I have great respect of that particular company. But, I also would elevate, there's been many terrific Nordic politicians. And I say that because the Nordic politicians, to me, often are really good at balancing this principle and pragmatism. I mean, Nordics are ultimately very pragmatic individuals, but they have clear values and they're very good at communicating what those values are. And right now, if you think about how difficult times these are to lead, and I look at my own president, Alexander Stubb of Finland, and how clear he has been in when he communicates about Ukraine, about the direction for European Union, about those central Nordic, Finnish, European values, how he's managing the very fragile transatlantic relationship through his direct engagement with President Trump. And I think in many ways, he's brave, he embraces new technology, he embraces new ideas, but he's also very inspiring in his commitment to knowing what makes Finland fantastic, what makes the Nordic countries just world-class example. I think the pride with which he talks about own country, his own region and Europe is just something that I think really makes a difference. I think he's a great ambassador of the Nordics abroad. And I think he's not a rare politician in the sense that there are many great Nordic leaders. And I think we need a lot of that principle and pragmatism in business world and in politics as well.
And it seems like it's such an opportunity at the moment with US and China kind of shifting, the power structures on the global stage. There's an opportunity for more voices to be heard rather than this just kind of bilateral discussion. There's an opportunity for new voices to emerge.
I completely agree. And if I can elevate a story, a Scandinavian one, is that I raised my 3 kids in the US, and I still wanted to give them the kind of Nordic safe childhood. And it's sometimes very hard when you raise them in Manhattan. So we always read the Nordic stories. We read the Moomins, we read the Longstocking. And right now, I really hope that some of that courageous and some of that kindness of the movies is so entrenched in who they are, because I think you need that in today's world. So there's a lot, I think, that they can draw on also when they think about how they face this world. And I think they are very blessed. Even though they were raised here, they feel very Nordic, they feel European. And I think that is just a tremendous asset for them.
Yeah, I feel very lucky to get invited to the Finnish Independence Day celebrations at the consulate every year. It's a lot of fun, and it's wonderful to see the community pull together here too.
Absolutely.
What do you think is the number one takeaway we should have at the moment as innovators in the space? What should we be thinking about when it comes to this intersection of innovation and sustainability? Is this a time to focus on the competitiveness of innovation? How should we be thinking about this, especially from a tech perspective where so much is shifting so quickly?
Yeah. So I really think we need to be brave. We need to be really courageous. And I think it's the moment, not just for incremental innovation, which is also valuable, but also just truly disruptive innovation. And also, I think we need to ask the question, what kind of innovation is the innovation that is worth striving for? So in many ways, I asked this question when I studied these tech platforms, that how big of an innovation is the X platform? Is that really making societies better, individuals happier, our experience with the world healthier and more fulfilling? It may be a sort of profitable innovation, but I don't think the Europeans need to focus, and the Nordics should be focused on being the next Google or running the X platform. But I think we really need to think about what's good for our economies, but what's good for our societies and for our individuals. And there's a vast, vast space to innovate in ways that actually make a difference and make lives better. And I think that's the kind of conversation about innovation that I would like to see.
Yeah. And that goes for all of us, not just for companies in the Nordics, but companies here, is really what's going, if we're bold and if we're brave, what will actually make our societies better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think our future prosperity really depends on that.
So my last question is, when it comes to tech, aside from the obvious elephant in the room of AI, where do you think our focus should be? If it's regulatory sustainability issues, when we're thinking about these next 5 years between now and 2030, what do you think should be central in our thinking as we go forward in our own agendas?
So I think in many ways, the hardest balance is that technologies like AI just present tremendous, unprecedented opportunities that no company and no government should forgo. We really need to harness AI for the benefit of our societies and for our companies. But at the same time, we cannot be blinded by this pursuit of the tech race, the AI supremacy, the unprecedented profits, and not attend to the obvious downsides as well. There are risks. And AI is a force of good, but it also has the potential to make the societies and individuals in many ways either redundant or really put their lives at risk. So it can be a threat to democracy. It can be used in ways, in conflicts, where I think there are just tremendous challenges that need to be very carefully managed. So I think getting that balance right is a really big challenge for all the regulators. And I think even well-intentioned regulators will have a hard time getting that right. And that's why I think we need to be very active citizens. We need to be very active companies. We need to be very active developers to give the input in that societal conversation and in that regulation and really kind of take ownership on that AI and broader technological revolution so that we are active consumers of technology alongside being active developers of technology. So I think it really affects us all. And that's why I think we all should feel we have a stake and we articulate our views on where the society should be heading with technology.
Yeah. Anu, it has been such an enlightening conversation. I cannot thank you enough for this discussion. Please check out Anu's book, the most recent one, Digital Empires, The Global Battle to Regulate Technology, as well as her 2020 blockbuster, The Brussels Effect, How the European Union Rules the World. Both of those are phenomenal choices to dive deep into some of the things that we've been discussing here today. Anu, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So I would say LinkedIn is where I am quite active. You also can find my contact details at Columbia website. I love hearing from you. And Susan, this was really a great conversation. I thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much, Anu. And please come back. We've got more episodes of Nordic Visionaries where you'll get fresh perspectives on things and questions you never even thought to ask. Thank you so much for joining me, Anu.
Thank you. Bye-bye.